Well, Girish, it's part of a broader nationwide attempt to alleviate pressure on overcrowded jails. He's also spoken about sending people convicted of drugs crimes to rehabilitation instead of prison. He's even floated the idea of graft, prisoners convicted of graft being given a form of amnesty. So it's not just Papua specific, but given that Papua has for decades been locked in this low level but constant conflict between armed groups wanting independence and Indonesian security forces. Obviously, the idea of granting amnesty to political prisoners there is viewed as much more of an olive branch in that particular part of Indonesia.
And one of the most controversial groups there who could be eligible for this, people linked to armed organizations in Papua. Now, how many people are we talking about here?
So a human rights activist said we're probably only talking about dozens of people who are detained because Indonesia's coordinating law minister, Yusril Ishar Mahendra, he's the one who's been speaking about this. He says the government at the moment is gathering information on those who are detained in Papua to look at who potentially could be granted amnesty. But he's indicated that it would only be for people who are convicted of non-violent protest leaders, perhaps people who've been detained for hoisting the Independence West Papuan flag. They could potentially be eligible for release under an amnesty. But the Indonesian government is making it sound as though people who have been imprisoned for violent offences, such as being active combatants for pro-independence armed groups, that they wouldn't be in line for this sort of treatment. So one activist I spoke to said, you're probably only talking about, several dozen people who could be eligible. We don't know at this point, but nonetheless, it would be significant simply because of the symbolism of it.
Yes, of course, this is quite a long-running conflict, Bill, going back to, the years after independence. Can you give us, I suppose, the background to this conflict between Indonesia and certain sections of people in Papua?
Yeah, basically, all of Indonesia plus Papua was a Dutch colony. End of the 1940s, Indonesia fought off the Dutch and got their independence, but Papua remained under Dutch control into the 1960s. And at the end of the 1960s, there was a UN-backed referendum, which is seen historically as being widely farcical, which supposedly said most people in Papua wanted to become part of the relatively new Indonesian state. So at the heart of this conflict is these two ideas that can't be reconciled. You have the Indonesian national philosophy of a unitary state. Doesn't matter what religion or ethnicity you are, it can all come together under the one state. So why can't Christians in Papua, Melanesian Christians in Papua, be part of it? That's the view from Jakarta. And then the view from a sizable proportion of the population in Papua is that we don't want to be basically colonized by the Javanese. We want our own independent state like Papua New Guinea. And as you can see, you just can't, these two things can never be reconciled. And this is why the conflict has continued to simmer for decades and decades. Because a sizable proportion of people in Papua believe that the Indonesian government is exploitative, basically going in and getting its hands on the resources in Papua, using military force and a heavy security presence to suppress the desire for independence by many people, and this remains the case today.
Okay, Bill Birtles in Jakarta, thank you very much for keeping us up to date with this story. Thank you.